right, I think we'll go ahead and kick it off. So welcome to Boundaries and Balance, Finding Your Path in Unprecedented Times. In this event, hosted by Propeller Consulting, we will discuss the ways that boundaries become blurred, especially in this unusual place that we find ourselves, where many of us are taking on different responsibilities, from working from home or looking for work, juggling homeschooling and childcare, getting involved in our communities and supporting others that might be out of work. It's certainly more challenging than ever to focus on our priorities and align them to how we want to spend our time. Our agenda today differs slightly from that which is on the registration page, in that the breakout room sessions are limited to 15 minutes. If you feel compelled to chat more with different folks that you meet in the sessions, we've invited everyone to share their LinkedIn information so you can do some networking. But we wanted to make sure that make sure that people feel comfortable and get maximum insight from our panel discussions. So we'll start with just the panelist introductions and the topic introduction. We'll jump to panelist insights, and then we'll have the breakout room discussions, and then come back together for a summary of the topic. So feel free to join us at the end for additional Q&A and, again, that summary. So there are a lot of folks that work to make this event possible. Thank you to all my wonderful colleagues who leaned in. Please feel free to post all of your questions to the chat box, and JD will be moderating that and popping those up as is appropriate. Like I mentioned, we'll have some contact information for those of you that chose to provide it to everyone, so that you can use this as a networking opportunity as well. This session is being recorded, just a reminder of that in case anyone is uncomfortable. And finally, I just want to say that to veterans, we're happy that you made the time to join us today, and would like to acknowledge any veterans that are participating in our session. So thanks for your service. So one of the ideas, and there were a lot of ideas that we had about juggling all of the different areas in our lives, so, and the challenges that come with that right now. Something that really resonated with our team was this idea of 4 burners that Emma Isaacs describes in a podcast interview. To the question, can women have it all? Her answer is essentially yes, but not at the same time. And so we'll listen to that excerpt now. It's a brief one. We can come back to it at the end, perhaps. Essentially, what she says is, you can think of your life as having four burners that are available to you. And to be really successful, your option is to have just 2 or 3 of those burners going at any time. And so it's a matter of identifying your priorities. And I think that in this time, it has become particularly challenging for many of us to even think about our own priorities, because there's so many unknowns and so much chaos in the world and in our personal lives, and that looks like a range of different things, right? So I think just taking a moment to center on what is important to us might feel like a luxury, but it's something that's essential if we're going to make the choices that best align with living our best life. So I will, so let me get back to the presentation and we'll move it along. All right, so hopefully this piece will go a bit smoother. It's my pleasure to introduce our panelists for today's session. They come from diverse backgrounds, both professionally and personally, and we're so grateful to have them here today to talk with you all about their experiences on this topic. I will allow them to share their own bios, starting with Amy Whedon, Propeller's own CEO.
Yes, thank you so much, Leah, and hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing great on this Wednesday. My name's Amy Whedon, and I thought, as Leah mentioned, I'm the CEO of Propeller, which is kind of a 120-person firm, so take responsibility for that organization. And I thought it would be helpful to introduce the other things that I'm juggling. I have a 14-year-old son and 11-year-old daughter who are homeschooling at the moment for what that is. And then I'm also on a board of a nonprofit that's facing a lot of kind of unprecedented challenge during 2020. So that I'll just use that as my intro.
Thank you, Amy. Heather, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's really great to be part of this esteemed panelist. I feel pretty honored about that. I'm actually talking to you guys from the snowy tundra of Minnesota. We had quite a few inches yesterday, so that's been fantastic. Although I will say I'm still truly an Oregonian at heart. So, so it's good to see a lot of faces from the Portland area. I'm just, I'm not really going to go through my whole background. I'm really pretty much a globe trotter. Most of my career, I've been running global organizations, and I actually purposely chose at the end of last year to leave a really big role for a couple of reasons. I was working for a $17 billion German conglomerate and running operations for North and South America. And one of the biggest reasons for me was really finding that work-life balance. It was really getting out of control for me. And so I purposely chose to leave. It was a hard decision for me. And also I wanted to get back into consumer goods because I really enjoy being so much closer to the consumer. It's an interesting journey that I've been on over the last few months of just self-reflection, and I will leave it at that.
Thanks, Heather. Angie, you want to wrap up the intros for us?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Angie Tomlinson, and I am very humbled to be on this panel with such accomplished women, and also to be invited to be part of this these Propel Her events, because I think that right now, with all of us working remotely, mostly, we're all trying to find this community for ourselves, and this is such a great space. So thank you so much for facilitating that. I appreciate that very much. So anyway, back to me. Kind of boring. I grew up in California, and I was there through through college, and then I moved out to the East Coast, and then I came back to Oregon, or I came back to the West Coast, and came to Oregon for grad school. And after that, I first started in consulting in environmental science, and then I moved on to the government. Along the way, I got married and had children. I have two daughters, a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old, which, they're a little bit older, so I'm not homeschooling like everybody else with younger children as much, but they're still a huge part of my life. And let's see, after about 2.5 years ago, I started working for the city of Portland again for the Bureau of Development Services, implementing electronic plan review, which is a complete, very different thing for me. So now I'm supposed to be this technology expert, and you will see as I fumble around with the technology today that I'm no expert as it is. So, so please be patient with me too. I appreciate that. Our team, I'll get into it a little bit more throughout this, but our team is implementing some software that will allow permits for building to be done electronically completely. It was previously a paper process, and we are migrating to an electronic process. So I'm on that team. So really nice to have everybody here though. Thank you.
Thanks, Angie. So jumping into our questions for the panelists, the first question is the most basic. So starting at the foundational level for this topic, where have you experienced challenges in setting and maintaining boundaries? And I think that for all of us, the story is a little bit different, but I think that the panelists have some interesting backgrounds to share. So kicking it off is Angie for this question, if you want to share your response.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know why I'm talking so fast and I'm nervous. This is these are my people. So thank you. Thank you. I will try not to talk very fast. I'm not on an interview, I know. So I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it. And don't worry about the technical difficulties. Obviously, I think I kicked us off on a pretty strong foot there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Leah. No. So early in March, when the city of Portland asked everybody to, pretty much the city of Portland, our bureau in general of 500 people was asked to work remotely for safety reasons. And I think, everybody had, kind of went home to work remotely, or a lot of people did. A large part of the entire workforce went home to work remotely. And we didn't know how long we were going to be working remotely. Our team implements electronic plan review software, which will allow people to work remotely, but we hadn't implemented it through the entire bureau yet. It was only it was probably about 10% of the projects were electronic plan review at the city of Portland at that time. And we knew that we had these people at home that were trying to figure out how to work in this way. And we didn't really know how long we were all going to be working remotely at that time. We had no idea that it was going to be 9 months later and we'd still be doing this pretty regularly. So those first couple of weeks was a lot of a guessing game as to what's going on, and trying to figure out new processes for everybody. But there was a lot of pressure on our small team to try to figure out how to get our entire workforce working from home. And our team, which there was 3 of us at the time, our team was working very, very long hours, and it was really stressful. And we had no boundaries. I had no boundaries. It was just work, work, work. And I didn't realize that it was work, work, work at the time until one night when my kids wanted to play a board game, and I said to them, "I'm sorry, I can't do it. I need to get this done." And it was about 9 o'clock at night. And my youngest daughter turned to me and said, "All you ever do is work." And it hurt me that she said that. It really, I mean, I bring it up in conversation now because it really, really hurt me. And I really wanted to rethink how everything was happening. But at the time, I felt, and our team felt, we didn't really have a choice but to try to work all the time, because the rest of the bureau was kind of depending on us, and we wanted to make sure that everybody could work at the time. And truth be told, our team has a lot of passion for this work and implementing this software, which I know sounds totally kooky and really smarmy, but we just do. We want this to be a success for everybody that needs to use electronic plan review. We want people to be able to use it. And in order for them to use it, they also needed to know how to use their computers from home in all these different setups. And we were kind of the go-to people for that. So yeah, in the first 3 months, there were no boundaries. And everybody on my team, I think, gained weight, which was really sad also. We were just stressed out and out of control. And I think by June, talking to them, we all by that time, the fires had kind of been put out. We still have a lot of fires, even up until today, but we tried to circle back around and tried to figure out a better way of trying to work with these things. I'm not perfect, and our team isn't perfect, but the good thing is that we all still have a passion for our job, and none of us got burnt out, thank God, because without anybody on my team, I don't know what I would have done. And we all really depend on each other a lot. So yeah, there's still a lot of challenges in maintaining those boundaries. So thank you.
Thanks, Angie. Heather, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Angie's story is so different from mine. And I think it's really indicative of how this pandemic has created these kind of extremes, one end to the other. I've certainly seen it within our industry, within the consumer products industry. You have the types of products that are going absolutely out of control, insane. And even within our own organization, I've got 8 brands, and I will tell you, a couple of our brands the demand has fallen off the earth, right? And as well, but on the flip side, I have products that were, 200% over plan. So it's kind of similarly aligned with how I think my experiences have been very different from Angie's experiences. For me, one of the big things is, I purposely, as I mentioned before, I purposely chose to leave a very big role. I love challenges, and that's one of my own personal issues, is that I tend to create, boundary setting is my own kind of, I could be my own worst enemy, right? So when I left my old role, and I purposely chose to get back into consumer goods, and I wanted to be in a much smaller organization, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and I'm not traveling. So again, beforehand, I would be traveling all the time, 3 weeks out of the month. Always, it was always on a plane. I always knew, like, I had my schedule completely firmed up, and sometimes I'd have to, juggle quite a bit in my schedule, but it was the thing that kept me going. And now with the pandemic, it's really, I'm at home. And so what I'm finding myself doing is filling my time up with things that I probably shouldn't be filling my time up with, right? I really need to set those. And that's what I've been trying to do over the last few months, is saying, okay, does this really contribute to the health of Heather, the health of my family, right? And the health of everybody around me. And it's kind of similar sentiment around how you would look at your own organization and provide, those visions and those values. I mean, I've been really trying to, apply those same principles to myself. So again, I think it's very different from what Angie's experience, where I'm finding that I have extra time, and I have these kind of withdrawal sessions, from where I was before, where I was thinking, I'm feeling extremely guilty that I'm not busy on the go all the time. So that's really been the interesting challenge for me over the last few months.
Great, thank you, Heather. And Amy, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, such great stories in terms of just both on one side, kind of participating in a team like Angie is, sort of with a ton of work in front of you. And I really resonated with what Heather said of trying, sometimes almost falsely filling up your time because you're feeling like you need to. For me, it's obviously been a super challenging year for everyone, and being a business owner and feeling responsible for a large group of people and making sure everyone's employed and happy and all of that, 2020 has presented just unique challenges. I think when you hit a certain point in your career, there's that sort of acknowledgement that you're always going to have a to-do list, that you're never going to get through everything. And, part of your role is sort of making sure that you're constantly shifting priorities and evaluating what's the most important thing, and feeling good about stepping away, even though you haven't accomplished everything on your to-do list. And so I think what's really been challenging this year is that to-do list got a lot longer and a lot more robust in some ways. And I would probably put some of that responsibility into what I would call emotional labor, making sure that other people are taken care of. If other people are experiencing a lot of stress, a new baby at home, trying to do their work or whatever that may be, helping them set boundaries. So that's been a challenge. And then I think I mentioned this to the panel when we talked before, which is, I literally come down from, waking up, I grab a cup of coffee, I start working within like 15 minutes of like awake. And, and then I'm checking my email, like maybe a half hour before I go up to my room to go to sleep. And it's not that I'm working that whole time, but there's just much more sort of fluid time in terms of I'm working, it's sort of like I'm working all day. And before, when I would either travel to, even the office or go to a different location, there was this transition time. And so I think what I'm experiencing more than anything is just that lack of transition time between home and work. I have an office space on the main floor of my house. I'll cook dinner, I'll check my email, I'll have dinner, I'll go back and do some work. And so it feels like that constant work piece. So that's been a challenge for me.
Thank you all. Yeah, I think that the never-ending to-do list resonates, and the differentiation between rooms and time frames and how you spend your day is really tough. So moving on to the next question. What tips do you have for evaluating priorities in what receives your energy and attention? So, you didn't hear the four burner theory from Emma Isaacs, but in my recap, that's one approach. But I'd love to hear the panelists' thoughts on this, and I think we have Amy kicking it off.
Sure. I mean, I love the theory of the four burner piece because I think that resonates with my strategy of sometimes I put attention towards my kids because they need it. Sometimes I put attention towards myself because I need it. Sometimes I'm working with my colleagues. So, I try to be pretty structured in really understanding all the various components of my life that I do need to spend time on. And that spans work and personal, and recognizing that there's some stuff that's very important but not urgent, and some stuff that's urgent and I really need to take care of, but on a large scale is not really that important. And so really kind of carving up time in my day. My first hour or two is really just kind of responding to emails, being fluid in terms of like, oh, I have a question or I want to do something. So giving myself that time to respond to things that are urgent, but then also kind of creating time for myself to work on things that are more important that I need to have quiet time for. And so I think that really helps kind of set up those priorities, and knowing that, hey, I have something important I need to do, and on Thursday at 4 o'clock, I'm going to spend time on that. It kind of removes it from my personal stress of like, oh, I need to get that done. It's like, oh yeah, I have Thursday at 4. I'm going to really focus on that thing. And so that's one of the things that I think helps. The other thing is really just kind of, as I mentioned, that recognition that you're not going to get everything done, and being kind of kind to yourself, and sort of not. I think it doesn't really help when you're kind of down on yourself if you're not getting everything done. And so, sort of recognizing, okay, I didn't get that done. That's okay. I can kind of push that to the next day. So again, I think structured processes and, helping your calendar, what Angie talked about, this sense of, there are times when you really do need to just work a ton. Like, you need to be able to show up and drive and deliver, but you can't do that all the time, right? And so you need to kind of have some gas in the tank for those moments. And so just being really cautious and conscious, like Heather has been about her career, and like where you hit that max level, and making sure that you're not at that level all the time, because that's not good for your health. And it certainly doesn't allow you to have great output. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I love the idea of triaging, and it feels like a real project management activity to put it in an urgent and important chart as well. I like the breakdown. Heather, did you have something that you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, Amy really touched on a lot of different aspects that I would absolutely connect with. And I, as I had mentioned before, for me, I've really taken kind of the principles of what you would do to set, the 3 goals of an organization, kind of similarly to myself. And then, but one of the biggest things for me is really, I just love people, and I really like helping people. And I think, during this time, especially, there's been, again, this kind of these extremes that I've seen where there are a lot of people that unfortunately have lost their position, their jobs. And so they're in transition. And I know how lonely that place can be. And so I've been, spending a lot of time trying to help others. But then what I've recognized also is that, one of the things my grandfather told me many years ago, and he was a very, very successful business owner, and I hope I'm just a smidgen of what he was as a leader. But he said to me, it's kind of like the safety protocol on an airplane. If the airplane's going down, you got to put your mask on first before you can help others. And so for me, I've always, now it's really focusing in on, all the things that I need to do, similar to what Amy was saying is, I'm a prolific list maker. So I tend to do, and I'm horrible about my list because I write them down in different scraps of paper all over the place. So I just gather them up every day and put them together and then rewrite them in another, in my main spot. But then also focusing on, I've got to make sure that I'm whole first, and then helping others, helping people, especially my team first. Like my family comes, then my team, right? And then others outside of that circle. So it's kind of that, looking at that concentric circle and then keep, moving out that direction.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Is there anything that you wanted to add, Angie, before we move on?
First, I need to learn how to use the technology. I
Okay,
know
we're all
everything
learning.
that they everything that they said is very appropriate, and it is, you know, the list making and keeping track of everything is, and trying to put myself first. That's very hard though. So, so
Yeah.
thanks.
So as a leader, how do you foster an environment that honors boundaries in the workplace? This question comes to mind because I think many of us, we've read self-help articles and heard podcasts about how we can take care of ourselves, but thinking about how we contribute to that environment and that culture when we're sharing space in professional settings, and especially on teams where you have a leadership role. So seems appropriate that I punt this one to our leader, Amy, first, if you'd like to kick it off.
Yeah, I read this book, I think it was a couple of years ago that I loved. It's a very small book called Ego is the Enemy. And I've always really resonated with this. And I think akin to that is perfection is the enemy. I think we tend to, hold ourselves up to a degree of perfection across all the burners. And, whether, for me, I love to cook. And so if I don't make, a meal that is as up to my, skill that I can, then, I feel kind of bad about myself or whatever that may be. I mean, that's a kind of trite analogy, but I think it's one that's useful. And I
Yeah.
think just making sure, just allowing ourselves to say, you know what, I'm not making the bed today. I have multiple, piles of laundry, waiting to be done. I may not have done as good of a job at this, and being okay with that when you're trying to manage so much. And I think communicating that to others, again, there's times where excellence is really required. And, certainly it's something that we're all trying to achieve, but sometimes the drive for excellence can be its own barrier. So I think that's one thing, just, accepting kind of sometimes it, you are going to do a B- on something as opposed to an A+. The other thing I see our team, the people that I work with, really closely, like that we are a group of people. And that means that sometimes one of us is having a harder time than someone else, and the rest of us can pick up the slack for that person. So just being very self-aware around like, okay, someone's kid is sick, or someone's having a really hard deliverable, or someone's just having a hard time, honestly, and being able to be flexible enough to be like, okay, we need to give this person some space so that they can take care of what's important to them, and the rest of us can pick that up, and and then it's going to move to someone else. So I think part of the role of the leader is to kind of shift work, where it needs to be shifted, and bring people into the conversation where they need to be in, but also giving allowance for people who, for whatever reason, at the moment is not their best time. And so allowing them to kind of, take a break, step out, or even just participate in a way that's not, a little bit more passive, so that they can come back and be more energized later. So I think that's something. Heather and I think we talked about this concept of modeling behavior that you want to see. I enjoy working. I think workaholic has been used a few times in my environment. And so, but at the same time, I don't want anyone else to feel that they have to work at the same level just because I like to get up on Saturday morning and plow through some emails and get some stuff done. That doesn't mean that everyone else has to do that too. And so I think just little tips in terms, I'll use the Outlook function and send the email on Monday morning, even though I finished it on Saturday night, potentially. And just being thoughtful and conscious of that. Like, what are the signals that you're sending? And again, yes, on Saturday night with a glass of wine, maybe I do want to do some emails, but that doesn't mean everyone else has to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Amy. Angie, did you want to add your thoughts?
Yes, sorry about that.
No worries.
No, I was just typing in the chat that when the first time I heard Amy mention perfection is the enemy, she also mentioned how people can compare themselves to what they think is perfection, which doesn't exist. And I love that. That is my new mantra, Amy. Thank you so much, because I just, we all
Love
think
it.
that perfection exists, and we want to strive for that. and it's the wrong thing to strive for. I feel like, you know, excellence is a great thing to strive for, as she said, but perfection is, it's an impossible, it's just, anyway. So I will move on to my team and how I feel like my leadership helps them, hopefully, in that that, you know, I do try to observe the people on my team, and I tell them, I mean, when we had to go through those months of working all the time, I really wanted to make sure that they still had a passion for their job, because if they don't have that passion, they're not going to be able to do a good job, right? You know, if they hate their job and they want to be out, they're not going to be able to do all of this work, and we have a lot of work. So that is the one pulse that I really try to take a lot, and try to check in with the team to make sure that you know, as a leader, that I'm helping them still keep a spark for what they love about our work. So that's my little bit right there, but thank you.
Yeah, I love that. I think that part of protecting your energy and your space, I think, is protecting that flame and that spark that we have, because it can be smothered by overwhelm. If you're running too quickly, the flame will go out. So that's a great analogy. Heather, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I mean, both Angie and Amy really, really spoke to definitely some things that I experience, and I can completely understand. Um, the whole idea of, we tend to emulate our, we've talked about this before, Amy brought it up, emulate our leaders. And so I don't really trying to set the precedence or the example of not working on the weekends and not working in the evenings. But, kind of like Amy, I've also been labeled a workaholic, and that I don't have, good work-life boundaries. And for a long time ago, I mean, for a long time, I kind of wore it on my sleeve like a badge, right? To say, this, I'm working all the time. This is what I do. So what I've been doing lately is really trying not to foster that type of environment. And, even to the point where I remember some of my team members would say, back in the day when there wasn't Wi-Fi on a plane, that they always knew when I would land, because I would be working furiously on a plane, typing out my emails. And as soon as I landed, as soon as I got to a hotspot, I would connect, and like 2,700 emails would go out to my team, right? And I'm not doing that anymore. So those are the types of things that I'm really trying to be conscious of, and to protect the team, and protect my peers, and protect everybody around me from that type of behavior. And I do think the other part of this is really, I feel as a leader, especially as a functional leader in an organization, that there's a responsibility that I have to be kind of an umbrella, to protect, the team from the massive amounts of pressures that could be coming from the board, or from, if it's, whatever, however the ownership structure is, and really being that filter to make sure that the individuals in the organization are really focusing in on the things that they need to do to be able to support, the objectives going forward. So that's really where, I would say the biggest thing is, that's really my biggest role as a leader in the organization, is to really be that filter. So yeah, beyond that, I think the one other thing that I would probably say is really quite important, I think, is that, to Amy's point and to Angie's point, I mean, everybody has their lives at home, right? And as a leader, we're not just supporting the life, our individual, or the person that's sitting in that seat, in that role, but we're also supporting their ability to function with their families and with their outside world. So, I think it's really important to understand that we don't just affect that one-to-one relationship, we're affecting beyond that, and really understanding that that's, how you work and how that person feels, and what's going on in their lives. You need to really understand that, and be patient and cognizant of that, because I think sometimes we can get so wrapped up in what we need that we forget that it's, our reach is much further than the individual that we're working with.
Definitely. And I love the umbrella analogy as well. I think that we've all had leaders that have amplified the pressure from above rather than dampened it. And so it's really nice to, when you do find yourself with one that is able to sort of think about the downstream impacts of the way that they show up. So is there anything else that folks wanted to add on these questions before we go to the breakout sessions? Any questions in the chat, JD?
Yes, we had one question from Ashley, and this is to the panel. What is your advice for how women of color can navigate boundaries? In addition to working hard to be noticed for their work, women of color are historically disadvantaged, often overtopped by family, community, and as peer mentors when there's still so few women of color in the workplace. How can white women leaders support women of color given the additional and unique pressures they're under?
That's a big question.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of bumble way through it.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And, yeah, and we'll have more Q&A after the breakout sessions, but I just wanted to give it to you. Yeah.
Well, I certainly wanted to resonate that sort of I think the overwhelming pressure that women of color have, today that are, particularly in the professional environment, and then just the amplification of what folks in that position are in their communities, mentors to other people. And it is an overwhelming, just incredible amount of pressure. And so I certainly can't speak from the position of being a woman of color because I'm not, and I wouldn't try to. But I think it is really just, we are at a really incredible time, I think, in history. And we really need to acknowledge how that affects everyone and recognize, I think, what Heather talked about, which is really spot on in terms of how, we're not just dealing with a one person, we're dealing with how they interact. And it's not just the people in their house, it's their communities and what they represent to others. And so I think just a lot more self-awareness and a lot less centering on ourselves. I think that this tends to be, being a Caucasian woman, sometimes I think we fought really hard to get to this place, in the professional world. And sometimes we're like, I'm here, look at me. But that's also a time to kind of say, well, who else needs to get here and how can we help them? And so, I just go to the sense of self-awareness and, not centering on ourselves and really trying to seek to understand and find ways to support.
Great. Is there anything that you wanted to add, Heather, Angie?
Yeah, Amy, absolutely. I think you're so right. I do think that I think Angie brought it up, this whole idea of comparing, it's really, and Amy brought it up too. I think we can be so hard on ourselves because we compare ourselves to others. And I will tell you, so I'm actually half Asian, half Caucasian. I'm quite a bit of a mutt. And so for many years, I was having this massive issue growing up saying, which box do I check? Because there wasn't one, right? It was like, I'm supposed to, which one am I supposed to check? And so finally there was a 2 or more races, which was, but I always felt like I had to be the spokesperson for the person that was biracial, right? And, or people would say, well, what are you, right? I mean, that was always the wonderful question. What are you? Okay, well, I'm Heather, right? So I do think that it's important, to Amy's point, of not feeling putting all that pressure on yourself because you are a person of color, to say, I've got to be the person up front helping the cause. Yes, we all do. I mean, I think it's important that we all band together and we work together. And I agree with Amy that we're at an amazing period of time in our lives that we have an opportunity to make things better in an exponential way. And I will say, I will absolutely say that that's the one amazing, messy teenager style situation that we have with the US, is that we actually talk about it and we move forward with it. Whereas you don't find that often in a lot of other countries. So I think, again, I think what Amy said is really important, is not to let it just completely overwhelm you and feel like you have to be the person that's, it's all on your shoulders, right? And really just work with others, and have that networking, have that network of people that you can rely on, and be vulnerable about it too. It's okay to be vulnerable about it.
Thanks, Heather. Is there anything that you wanted to add, Angie?
No, thank you. They both they both included a lot of how I feel. So thank you both, Amy and Heather.
Wonderful. So we'll move into the breakout discussions. We have a fun activity in the breakout sessions to just sort of crowdsource some ideas around some questions we've put together. So before we break out into those rooms, I just wanted to pop up some instructions for the idea boards we'll be using. And again, there will be facilitators in each of the rooms. So if you get there and you're like, oh no, what do we do? That individual will also be able to walk through this, but there will be a facilitator in each room. It's like a virtual whiteboard. And so each board will have 3 sections. And so to write your idea, you just click on the little green plus sign that corresponds with the associated question. It'll pop up a sticky and you can just type your idea on it and then click enter. If for some reason you accidentally pop it under the wrong question, you can just drag it to a different section. And if you really like something somebody said, you can +1 it in the lower left corner of the stickies. All of the answers are anonymous, so please feel free to be really honest. So Ashley, if you want to break us out into our rooms. All right. So to wrap it up, we wanted to give just some tips for setting these boundaries. So the first is tune into your feelings. Before you say yes to something, pause and check in with yourself. I think we don't spend enough time like just being in our bodies. We're often running around from one thing to another, totally in our heads, or thinking of how, the next task that we need to run to. And I think just pausing and settling into your body and checking in to notice any discomfort or anxiety or resentment that's coming up. Because those can be signs that we're overextending ourselves because we feel obligated to or guilty, or someone else is imposing expectations on us. The next one is get clear on your limits and priorities. So along the same lines, just taking some time to really understand and identify which 2 burners are the most important to you at different stages in your life. And that better prepares you to make decisions that are in alignment with your goals. Similarly, understanding what you can tolerate or accept to keep those burners functioning is essential, not only to not reaching a place of resentment and overwhelm. The third is be direct in communicating those limits. I think women in particular are often concerned with coming across as unhelpful or unfriendly. And in so doing, we can often overextend ourselves or burn out. And so in order for the boundary setting to work, those around you actually have to know what your boundaries are. It is possible to set boundaries in a respectful way, but I urge you to remember that no is a complete sentence. And finally, seek support and start small. Hopefully the people in your lives want to see you succeed, whether professionally or in your relationships and parenting or in any other endeavor you're taking on. So communicate with the people around you your need to set those boundaries in certain areas, and it can help to ensure success when it becomes challenging, because they can be your support and cheerleader. Kicking off this practice with something or someone that feels less intimidating can also be a great place to test the waters. One thing in our breakout session that was talked about that was a great point was often when we set these boundaries, it feels like a big deal to us to sort of change our expectations of ourselves, but those around us actually don't notice a huge difference because we were the only ones holding ourselves up to that ideal of perfection. So that's it. That's our program for you today. For those of you that felt compelled to share your contact information for LinkedIn. We'll be sharing those out. Thank you again to all of our panelists for your participation, and my co-facilitators and all of you that chose to attend on this holiday. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for attending.
Yeah, thank you. It was wonderful.